is about recycling leftover bits of clay. You will either have leftover bits that got cut off something that you just made, or you'll perhaps have bits that you have rehydrated. It's really easily broken. I honestly didn't tap very hard with that. So don't worry, I'm going to recycle this. It's not wasted clay. If your clay gets broken or dried out, then there is a quite simple way of rehydrating it. So you need an airtight bag, and it's best to put the pieces of clay in quite small. So, you know, just crack them a bit more. Once you know that they've gone, you might as well enjoy the cracking and put them into the bag. Just try not to get any bits of fluff in there. You're really just wanting clay in your bag. Then I've got a box of just a Tupperware with water in it here, and the first thing I'm going to do is to put a couple of spoonfuls of water in with the clay. Teaspoons. You don't need loads of water, just a few drops really, and it's very lazy of me not to get up and get a spoon. Slightly more than that. There we are. So just at the bottom of the bag you can see a little bit of the water hanging around. Then what you need to do is close the bag in a way that really pushes out as much air as it's possible to push out. So I've kind of rolled it before I do this double zip block thing. The less air, the better. So now what you've got in here is some water and some dry clay that we're hoping will combine with each other. And what I'm going to do, it's very simple. I'm going to put that bag into my box of water, making sure that the clay part is under the water level and making sure that no water can get into the bag. I could have crushed this clay up with a rolling pin inside that bag, and if you do that it will combine with the water more quickly, but be careful that you don't cut your plastic bag, because then if water gets inside this, then the whole plan is ruined. Because what's happening is that, or so I've been told, the water pressure which is surrounding the clay in here is pushing the water molecules into the clay. I don't know if that's correct, but it works, and that's all that matters. So in a couple of days' time, I will remove it and I'll squish it with my fingers and see if it's squishable into a ball inside. If I feel like I hadn't put enough water in, I'll put a little bit more in and do it again in a couple of days' time. And it should be within a week that you've managed to squish that clay into the semblance of a ball of usable clay. Okay, so I left it 2 days, and when I squished it, it wasn't at all right. I hadn't put enough water in, so I put probably the same amount of water again than I just showed you, and I left it inside the water for another 2 days, and now look, it's really just right. Can you see how that is all now not hard? So I'm squishing it up as best I can into a ball, and then I'm going to leave it again to finish the process. But you see how that's just beginning to squish up. So it's a bit of a pain. It would be much better if you could just not let it get dry, but if you get it dry, this is going to work. So now I'm going to leave it just for another day, and then I'll be able to take it out and really put it together. This has been in here for a week now, and to be honest, it could have been in here a couple of days less than that if I'd got the amount of water right the first time. And it's definitely taken the water in now. And it's quite hard to get the amount of water right. You often have to start again. But you can see that it's very squishy now, and it was completely dry before. And I'm just putting it into a ball. You can see it's a bit too wet. It's getting a little bit wet on my hands. So I'm just squishing it into a ball, and I'm going to just leave it here, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, just so it can get a little bit drier. If I'd got the amount of water exactly right, I wouldn't have had to have done that, but that's just how it is. And after it's been sitting here for 20 minutes, I'll just show you what you do next, because you can't just use this instantly. Just a word about these little offcuts here. Don't just squash them up and reuse them. You definitely can reuse them, but you need to squash them in a very careful way so that you don't get air bubbles into your next piece. You will either have leftover bits that got cut off something that you just made, or you'll perhaps have bits that you have rehydrated. Either way, the important thing is that you don't just roll it when it's looking like this, because you're going to get air bubbles in it. What happens in the kiln is that the air expands and it's bigger than the clay. And of course, it's got nowhere to go other than through the clay, and that creates an explosion. It ruins your piece of pottery. It might ruin the pieces of pottery that are next door to yours in the kiln. So it's really important that you make sure before you roll your clay that it doesn't have any air pockets in it. So this looks like I could probably make something with it, but if you just look at the side of it, there's the potential inside there for all sorts of air pockets that I didn't mean to be there and that I wouldn't necessarily be able to see. So what potters do is something called wedging. If you look up spiral wedging or ram's head wedging on YouTube, you will see loads of examples, and the ram's head is the one that most people do. But for a small piece of clay, this is the one that I just rehydrated. For a small piece of clay, personally, I think my hands are too big to do any kind of spiral or ram's head on it, and I think that slam and cut works the best. So this is the slam and cut technique. Slam. And when you're slamming, did you see I turned that over? You don't want to slam at 90 degrees. You can turn it over and slam again. But what you're trying to do is create flat layers. And so the air is being squashed out. So I'm going to cut this, and you can see here, hopefully you can see, there's potential air pockets there. So what I've done is I've put these two pieces, again keeping them flat. Do not do that. That's 90 degrees, it won't work. They've got to keep the layers going. And I'm slamming again. And when people do it with bigger bits, they put their hands to kind of keep it in shape. But for a small bit, personally, I find a flat hand is the best thing. And after you've done a few slams, cut it again, one on top of the other, not at 90 degrees. And you just keep going until you feel that you've managed to slam all the air out. You're creating layer upon layer of squashed out air. Beautiful. Oh, so sorry, whoops, the camera fell over because of all the slamming, but I'm just going to keep going. Yeah, the camera's moving. It's not a great way of demonstrating. Let's make this the last one. Okay, so again, flat and slam. Okay, I've got to stop because the camera's fallen over twice now. And what I want to do is just roll it and show you that there's no air pockets. Now, if there were air pockets, as I roll it, little kind of undulating worms would come under the surface. And that's the air pocket under the surface. As you squash the clay, the air's got nowhere to go, so it kind of moves around. It looks great. It's really fun when you create it, but it's a bad thing. So when you're rolling, if you can see that you've got little air pockets moving under the surface of your clay, which I have not, but if you do have, and I've had them many, many times, then you need to stop and slam again. The wedging is really important. If you don't do it and your clay does have air pockets in it, your piece in the kiln has the potential of being absolutely spoiled. So make sure that you've slammed all of the air out of your clay, or look up on YouTube and watch some of the spiral technique, or the ram's head is the most common one. Maybe the slamming doesn't suit you, but I think for a smaller piece like this, it is the best one. And then when you roll, just check that as you roll, you're not finding air pockets. If you think of it a little bit like kneading bread, what you're trying to do is the opposite. With kneading bread, you're trying to put the air in, and with clay, you're trying to take the air out.